Coogs house. All right, so remember how yesterday I said that there was going to be a part 2? Well, here's that part 2.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're U of H fans, just hit again, stop by. Please be sure to subscribe down below that we can get the podcast in your news feed each and every day. We really appreciate you making us your first listen of the day. Again, as we approach 250 subscribers on YouTube, if that's where you're finding us, good to see you again. We're going to give out a Marcus Sasser t-shirt at 250. So once we get there, A, to be entered, you have to be subscribed, so make sure we get there. And then B, be commenting on the videos. That way you have a chance to win the shirts. If you listen to the whole preview, can't think of anything to say, please tell us on your PB&J if you'd like to have jam, jelly, or preserves. That's the question for both previews. Always kind of somewhat synonymous going across the board. Thank you all so much. Again, yesterday we mentioned that was the first half of a preview. The preview just went long, so we split it in half here. Today we get to hear some from Dana Holgorsen as well. So without further ado, let's jump back into previewing the Independence Bowl with Andy Yanez. Let's listen to Holgorsen and kind of what he's saying as they prepare. This video is courtesy of Houston Athletics, but let's hear from the man himself. He's the guy in charge of preparing them, and then I want to talk to you about what he has to say for a second. So let's listen to Dana for a minute. If I hit it. Oh, long video. 1 sec.
Kind of start with an open statement about being here and how you guys feel about being this right playing another football game this year.
Yeah, excited about this opportunity. I've been talking to the guys all week about, coming to Shreveport, excited and ready to go. We had a couple of good practices the last 2-3 days, and get here and kind of settle in, have a couple of practices, and then look forward to Friday. I hear it's going to be nice and chilly. Bowl games, you never know with weather. You can't worry about it. You got to deal with it just like your opponent does as well. So got a good quality opponent, and the University of Louisiana. Well aware of them. We're neighbors. It's a couple hours down the road. Haven't played in about 15 years or something like that. So, but we have played 9 times, so this will be the 10th time that the two's been together, and there's no better way to do it than do it right here in Louisiana. So excited about this matchup and excited about the Independence Bowl.
The matchup itself, just the excitement of being bowl eligible, any thoughts on the reception so far? I know it's very early.
Yeah, we just rolled in here, man. It's 4 hours in the rain. Nothing to be real excited about. Getting here. Like I said, you can't do anything, worry about that. But bowl games are fun. Bowl games are a reward. I think with all the pressure of college football and, the expectations that were put upon us, earlier in the year and didn't meet that, opportunity to be able to play one more is important to me, and it's important to our football team. We have an opportunity to win this game. We didn't play very good the last time we played, so got a bad taste in our mouth when it comes to that. And want an opportunity to be able to play one more game here. These seniors have done some amazing things. We've won 19 games in 2 years. Now we didn't meet our expectations that were put upon us this year, but nonetheless, we have an opportunity to go play one more time, and we're looking forward to doing that.
Houston Cougar, Speedy Stevenson from the Shreveport area.
Yep.
From Shreveport, what has he told you about the city, just in past interactions?
Well, I haven't really talked to him too much here. He's been in the NFL, was up in Buffalo, and just got picked up by the Browns. So he hasn't been able to play very much. He got hurt earlier in the year. But Shreveport's is obviously it's our neighbor. It's Louisiana, the state of Louisiana and Houston are really good neighbors. There's a lot of guys on our team that know people from Louisiana, and there's a lot of people from Louisiana that are currently residing in Houston. So, just I think the fact that the two places are very familiar with each other, I think makes up for an intriguing matchup.
What do you feel like are some keys for you guys against
Well, then I've been talking turnovers a bunch. I usually don't, but they're really good with creating turnovers. They're 18th, top 20 in the country in turnover margin. Last year we were top 20 in turnover margin. This year we're almost dead last in turnover margin. We just haven't done a very good job of protecting the ball. We haven't done a very good job of getting turnovers. So I think when the margin is that drastic, that's something that you got to focus on. Just as far as getting ready to play, man, it's always the most excited team ready to play. And I think our team's excited about being in Shreveport and excited about this matchup. All good?
So interesting stuff there from Dana. Andy, I'm going to ask you a couple questions about some notes I took during it. But what was your initial takeaway after hearing Dana speak as he's getting ready for the bowl game?
Well, my initial takeaway, he looks really warm and bundled up when it comes to how he's dressed. No, I think he hit on a lot of things. First, what reminded me, and honestly, I had forgotten about it until I heard him in that clip in regards to Louisiana and them being neighbors. He said that it's kind of a recruiting ground for Houston, and which is something that we talked about opening in the segment, but that's something that they've actually been able to take the opportunity to recruit in that area. They're kind of making the best out of the situation in terms of that aspect. But outside of that, in regards to specifically talking about the game, again, hit onto the points, just going back to that Tulsa game where that really left a bitter taste in their mouth, specifically when it comes to the seniors on the team, because the Golden Hurricane came in here and really they maybe embarrassed might be a strong word, but they certainly ruined the senior night for the Cougars in that aspect. And a senior class, like you mentioned, going back to 2 seasons, they've been able to win 19 games throughout the past 2 years, and those seniors have been a big part of that. And that's something that they're going to be looking to avenge. Again, that might not be the right word to use, be able to avenge the season against Louisiana, but that's something that caught my eye because it's been a consistent message that they've said. I think overall, the next things is acknowledging the expectations that they had at the beginning of the season. That was something that after I can't remember if it was the South Florida game or the Temple game. It was one of those games. It was the game Houston won. It was their 6th victory that put them bowl eligible. And they asked him. It was actually one of our guys for Let's Rage Coogs. I'm a quasi plug-in Let's Rage Coogs post-game show right now. But Akib Ghazi asked Dana Holgorsen about, even though they qualified for the bowl game or were bowl eligible, is it kind of like, was it bittersweet in a way, because obviously coming into the season, they had much higher expectations, which and this is something that the players themselves had said, the goal was a season ago, they got to the American Athletic Conference Championship game. They had to travel up to Cincinnati. They were in that atmosphere. They were the only team standing in the way of history, really. If the Bearcats had lost that game, they don't end up making the college football playoff. They were able to get a taste of it. A couple players after Cincinnati won that game, they stayed on the field just to watch the Bearcats celebrate that American Athletic Conference Championship and kind of see what it's like. And all through the offseason into the training camps in August, that was the message. Like, hey, we want to get back. Not only do we want to get back to the American Athletic Conference Championship game, we want to win this time. We want to be that team that's hosting up the American Athletic Conference trophy and, getting into one of those New Year's 6 bowl games. And obviously those expectations fell way short. Now, when Holgorsen was initially asked about that, when they qualified for the bowl game, he was kind of defensive about it, just in terms of the expectations that were put on by outside people and all that noise. But since then, especially after that Tulsa game, he's acknowledged it. They fell short of those expectations. At this point, there's not much you can do about it. That's in the past. But what they can do is control the future, and that's to end the season on a win, end it on a positive note, and try to get some of that positive momentum. So that stood out with me. And then just the last thing about the game in and of itself, again, the turnover battle. That's going to be a big factor again in that weather, how cold it's going to be, who's going to hang on to the ball, who's going to avoid making those critical mistakes. And I think that's interesting. He alluded to that's been another weakness for the defense. They haven't been able to create turnovers like they did a season ago, and that's been a big factor because, to be quite frank, a lot of the time in the offense, or this past season, the offense has kind of had to put up points. At the very least, they've had to put up at least 30 to have a chance to win. That's been a big factor why they saw a lot of those struggles overall throughout the season.
Yeah, of the games they lost, they put up 30. I mean, 63. SMU sticks out, but they put up 30 and lost to Tulsa. They put up 30 and lost to Kansas, and put up 30 and lost to Tech as well. That doesn't speak very highly of your defense for, again, a team that not every team has great defense. I assume with the defensive line returners and stuff like that, and admittedly, Derek Parrish going out early in the season didn't help. I would have thought the defense would have stood more packed there.
Even with Parrish, they struggled to get stops against Texas Tech.
Yeah.
In that game, didn't Parrish have like 4 sacks in that game or something along those lines?
It was a crazy stat line because he still led the team in sacks like middle of the season.
And a big part of it was because of that Red Raiders game, but the biggest problem was in that secondary. And again, a big reason, you look at who they lost, and that's something that I'm sure people listening to this and be all, they're making excuses. You should be able to, that shouldn't be an excuse, but they lost Marcus Jones and Pepe Williams, who were really 2 solid veterans in that secondary. I mean, they're both playing in the NFL. Marcus Jones, it seems like he's starting to score touchdowns every week for the Patriots.
He's playing every snap. He's
I mean, he's doing what he did in Houston. I mean, he's just finding a way to impact the game, which that talent like that, and just players that, I'm gonna steal a quote from Kelvin Sampson, those are players that impact winning. Just find a way to make plays happen that'll help your team win. And that's something that really hurt this football team because they didn't have that aspect from it. And then you add the injuries on top of it. So you saw a lot of guys that, one, didn't get a lot of playing time within the past 2 years. So they were kind of thrust into that role of having to learn on the fly. But 2, just from a standpoint, there was always going to be a drop off. I think the biggest thing that really hurt from a fan standpoint is they didn't expect the drop off to be that significant. And then I think that's going to be interesting too as well, especially for the guys that will be returning for next season. It's going to be pivotal because especially against the Big 12 opponents, like, you're going to have to be able to force turnovers, or else you're going to have games like Kansas. That's a perfect example where, especially at the beginning of the season, they were hitting on all cylinders. It was probably the best Kansas team we've seen. It might be one of the great all-time teams, certainly within the past few years. The offense, for the most part, like they got stopped a couple of times, and from that point, the defense wasn't able to kind of pick up the offense when they struggled, and the rest of the way, it was playing catch-up, and that's the reason that at the end of the day, they weren't able to match those total points because the defense couldn't hold Kansas. And credit, the Kansas offense was on another level at that point, but that's something that they have to improve on. If you can't get takeaways against a team, again, they are a bowl game, they are a bowl team, but Louisiana, it has to start at some point, and to see that progression, especially from a lot of the guys who will be returning next season.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting too is that, like, a couple of things that Dana mentioned. One, you point his outfit, so I'm going to also point out his outfit. Dapper, like pea coat and scarf, and then that same paw print hat. He's got that's just his haircut.
He's just missing a Red Bull. He's just missing a Red Bull. It was off camera or something.
Yeah, the Red Bull was clearly before. That's why he was so energetic. Did you know that driving high is considered under the influence? That's right. Driving under the influence of marijuana is against the law in every state, even in states where marijuana is legal. That means driving high can get you a DUI. And if you think law enforcement officers can't tell when you're driving high, you're wrong. Your friends can tell. Your coworkers can tell. Even your parents can tell. Everyone can tell. So it makes you think that law enforcement officers don't know when you're driving high. Driving under the influence of marijuana can slow your response time and change how you perceive time and speed. So even if you think you're fine to drive when you're high, you're not. Because the bottom line is, if you feel different, you drive different. Driving under the influence is driving high is driving under the influence. So remember, drive high, get a DUI. This is paid for by the NHTSA. No, Dana's fun. But the neighbors comment, I don't think I'd really, because I'd been thinking about this as like a quasi home game for Louisiana. And frankly, when the bowl selections came out, I was like, oh God, we have to go, like, another embarrassing loss to be going to lose to them at home. Quickly looked up, it's a 3.5-ish hour drive from Lafayette to Shreveport to the bowl game itself. And then Houston looks like it's about 4. Right. And so theoretically, and thinking about like just the recruiting region, it's not quite the home game for Lafayette, I guess, that it was initially in my head, just because you see Shreveport, Louisiana, Lafayette, Louisiana, and it's not, obviously. I wonder how they spin this into recruiting, because obviously if you can, as you're moving into the Big 12, start to tap into some of those Louisiana recruits that typically go to your LSUs, or, you can convince some kid like, hey, you're a 3-star getting recruited by LSU. Why wouldn't you come be the man here? Those kinds of things to kind of build the program. Eventually you want to take the 5-stars from LSU too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the building of the program, I think, is important. I guess I'd kind of forgotten that Houston used to play them more often. I guess that just wasn't really in my mindset as far as like this used to be a more common opponent for U of H. Do you remember Houston playing Louisiana? Am I weird for not having that memory?
That was before my time in regard to following the program closely. But no, it's interesting. I think just a lot. It's just something when it comes to the histories of programs and the matchups they've had in the past. I think it is one of the cool things about the bowl games, because whether it's an opponent that you haven't seen often, like you look at last season when they play Auburn, or maybe it is Louisiana, when you're kind of reigniting a rivalry, especially from such a long time ago. There always seems to be some cool nugget when it comes to the history of programs. So it's one of the, I know, especially for bowl games, if you're not a New Year's Six, a lot of fans will be like, "Oh, okay, they're playing in the Independence Bowl." That's kind of the cool nuggets about it. And like you heard Horson say right there, that does mean something for the program, especially a veteran senior ridden program, that they're not trying to get out of here with back-to-back losses, especially the disappointing one to Tulsa. They're trying to kind of get that taste out of their mouth and again, just cap off their time in Houston on a good note.
You mentioned it's the third or fourth time he said this idea, and then Tank Dell said it in his "I'm leaving U of H after the bowl games" Instagram post. This idea of getting a bad taste out of their mouths, right? Tulsa tasted bad. Yuck, spit it out. I don't mean to project, but I would imagine the Houston Cougars beating Louisiana is not the kind of thing that, like, I would have been super surprised by. Frankly, there's a way to win this game ugly, and I don't know how much better the taste is in my mouth.
Yeah.
My question to you, Andy, I guess, is what does this have to look like to actually get that bad taste out of your mouth? Because, like, I didn't have a great taste after we beat Rice, right? Like,
No,
so what does
right.
that have to look like?
You're right. That's a great point, especially early on in the season, because that Rice game was a final non-conference game for the Cougars, I believe. So at that point, they had, I mean, really, the main argument the fans were saying is like they could very easily have been 0-4 after non-conference, because you forget that UTSA game. It seems like so far long ago, but no, that UTSA game was crazy. With it was 3 different overtime periods that it went into. They were able to stop Frank Harris in that last that stand, and I mean, it was just a crazy game to open up the season. But no, they lose to Texas Tech in overtime. They lose to Kansas, and Rice. It looked like they were driving down the field, and for a second, I thought they had they had scored a touchdown the last play of the game. I'm sure they would have gone for 2 had they converted. And then, lo and behold, you lose to the crosstown rival Rice. That was just that egg on your face, especially heading into the next week. They lost to Tulane, that was missing their star quarterback, and then they lose their backup quarterback on the first drive of the game. So again, it's just, going back to how crazy that season was.
Yeah.
But no, you're absolutely right. If they go into Friday and they play Louisiana, and it's one of those crazy games where, I mean, you heard it right there. Holgorsen said a lot of the times, especially with these bowl games, I think much more for this game in particular, because the players are going to be cold. I mean, from a fan standpoint, I mean, you pointed that out. It's a 3-hour drive for Louisiana, give or take. It's 4-hour drive for the Cougars. It's going to be sub 30 degrees. So from a fan standpoint, I don't think there's going to be a lot of juice in those stands when it comes to the atmosphere for either teams, to be quite frank. So it's going to be a lot more on the players themselves, like who's kind of self-motivated, how really, again, who has the most energy, who can go out there and make more plays. I think what looks for a good team, or for the Cougars to be able to get that bad taste out of their mouths, honestly, they have to look dominant. I mean, point blank, they have to be able to look like the offense for the most part, especially after that overtime game in Memphis, or not the overtime game, the crazy game. So many crazy games this season against Memphis, where they pulled the 20 plus points fourth quarter. It looked like they were dead in the water, and they showed life. in that game from that point on, basically until Tulsa's offense was on another level. We have to see that offense. And then again, going back to the defense, we got to be able to see the stretches. I don't expect them to go out, do what you did against East Carolina, but be more consistent in that aspect. Force a couple turnovers, be able to get some key stops, and then you'll have some positive momentum. That's how you get that bitter taste out of your mouth. And even on special teams, stop kicking it out of bounds on kickoffs, make errors like that. Like, that's at the end of the day, that's how you'll get that bad taste out of your mouth, because again, that was a storyline all off season. Like, we're excited. We're going to the Big 12. To be quite frank, at the beginning of the season, no Cincinnati, no UCF on the schedule. We should look really great in our final year in the American Athletic Conference. But there's another opponent like Louisiana. You're heading into the Big 12. You should be able to dominate them. From that standpoint, that's how, at least from a fan perspective, you'll get that bitter taste out of your mouth. And I'm sure from the players too. At the end of the day, the cliche, a win is a win. But if you can look dominant doing so, that's really the way you'll at the very least, you can have some silver lining that, we were able to turn it around for that last bowl game.
Yeah, and my hang up would be the turnovers, right? Defensively, it's not just tackling the guy in front of you. It's not, but it's like, I guess Sack Avenue did get sacks and tackles for loss, but making a play that impacts the game in a way, impacts winning. You stole Samson's phrase, so I'll steal it too. Making plays like that directly impact the outcome of the game, taking the ball away as a corner or forcing a fumble as a linebacker. Obviously, we've had a couple of different sacks and sack fumble kind of things for the season. That's the strength of the defense, but we can't keep just leaving it up to those four guys, whoever the four on the field at that point in time are. I like Nelson Caesar a lot, but he kind of just rotates in. I think the guy everyone seems to like on campus is Dutton Nwankwo, but that's neither here nor there. The truth to me is that if I look at this and I'm trying to make predictions, it's not about if Houston wins, it's how. And that's also how I'd predict how I feel waking up Saturday morning, right? Like, the game's Friday night, so when I wake up Saturday morning, if we go out there and rock them, it's like, okay, we're building, we're going to go get a tech quarterback, or we're going to get somebody in the transfer portal, we're going to keep this thing rolling. Like, do we win the Big 12 in year one? I don't know. Do we make some noise? Maybe, right? If we come out and only beat Louisiana by 7-10 points, I'm not sure that I'm feeling super comfortable heading into the offseason unless they make some splashy transfer portal news. What's going to take? Right. I would say what's going to take to make you wake up happy on Saturday morning with this outcome or with this game?
No, you make an excellent point. I think much more for the coaching staff, because that's going to be the consistent thing for the Cougars. Barring anything drastic happening, that's where the fans are going to have their confidence meter, if that makes sense. So if they go out there and, like you said, they look sloppy against Louisiana, worst case scenario, they lose to Louisiana, you're going to have the same old, I can already feel I can already see the tweets, see the reactions. They're going to be, this, there's got to be a change. Dana Holgorsen this, Dana Holgorsen that, blah, 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 blah. Whoever they do in that move, and even from a standpoint, in a fundraising standpoint, they've had that campaign for the whole season, basically, in the rise to be able to fundraise money as they transition into the Big 12. They need to look dominant. That at the end of the day is a non-negotiable. You have to be able to go in there, beat Louisiana by not just a touchdown, not just by a field goal, but look dominant and clearly look that you're clear-cut the better team. Just like going back to that game against Kansas. In that game, it was clear that Kansas was a level above the Cougars from that aspect at that point. That's how the Cougars have to go in there and got to make Louisiana look, because, nothing against Louisiana, but you're stepping up. It's going to be a much more grueling schedule, and something that Holgorsen said. I mean, I'm sure he's already seen the Big 12 schedule. He's reminded the media multiple parts about it. Like, once that Big 12 schedule gets released, which I think he said it should be any time now, before the end of the year, there's not going to be, a Temple on the schedule. There's not going to be a South Florida on the schedule every game. And the Cougars haven't been able to beat a Big 12 opponent going back to 2016 when they beat Oklahoma on the Baker Mayfield Light NRG Stadium. That's a long time. And Renu Couture, Chris Pesman, they've all said they're not going into the Big 12 just to be there. They want to compete. And right now, if they don't dominate Louisiana, I'm sure, or even if they lose, a lot of fans are going to be, we're just going to go and be in the basement of the Big 12, which that's not what you want from an athletic standpoint, especially what's supposed to be the premier program from the football side of things, heading into the first Power 5 schedule ever in university history, at least from the modern era standpoint, in what we would call Power 5 conferences.
Yeah, and I think you bring up an interesting point about Renaud Couture. She said at this point, it's a couple of coaches ago, that Houston was not going to be a program that was happy with 8-4 coaches.
Yeah.
I think the looming thing here is that, even if they win this game, they're 8-5, right?
Mm-hmm. Technically not 8-4.
Technically not 8-4, right? Technically not 8. I also admit that, I think that the non-conference games, the way Kansas was rolling, I think UTSA is a lot better than people realized they were week 1. I don't mean to say they didn't have a difficult schedule, but if they look bad against Louisiana, you mentioned people will be calling for Holgorsen's head. I can think of 9.5 million reasons why they won't. But
yeah,
what would it take? Is there any realistic option to do something else, especially at this point of the year? Feels kind of late.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think if anything would have been done, it would have been done within the quote unquote radio silent period that we just got through. Honestly, I don't know. Unless if they get shut out, which that's no.
Knock on wood.
That's right now is the point where I say there's no chance that happens. And then if we were living in a TV show, it cuts to them getting shut out against Louisiana. Yeah, I don't see that happening. Certainly, especially at this point, like you said, late. They're in the middle of their recruiting. I don't see anything happening drastic from that standpoint. I think regardless of this season, it is what it is. The eyes, unfortunately, are kind of looking past and how can they continue to improve. And at the end of the day, again, it's much more for the seniors. I don't think the seniors on this team, I think they showed, particular, going back to that Memphis game, they could very easily let go of the rope when they were down 19 in that fourth quarter. And they did it. And that's a credit to the seniors. That's a credit to the team overall, that they believe in the team and the coaching staff. So I don't think the bottom will fall out against Louisiana.
Andy, you're the guy to follow for all the post-game coverage, football and basketball. Tell people where they can find you, the show, the post-game coverage, all those kinds of things, as well as your work with Gallery Sports and all of that.
For sure. For football and men's basketball coverage, be sure to check out gallerysports.com, which, knock on wood, there should be a very, very cool story I'm piecing together going back to December 23, 2021 for the men's basketball program, which, just off the top, if you think of where this program was, the basketball program was this point last year, it wasn't the strongest point just in terms of what had been happening from a health standpoint. So I'm working on a cool story for that. Hopefully it should come out December 23rd, which is this upcoming Friday, same day as the bowl game. But gallerysports.com for written content, like you mentioned. Let's Rage Coogs for streaming post-game show. We'll be talking off air. The vision for that was to be kind of that kind of outlet for fans to be able to go out, speak. A lot of people don't want to speak on the show. They do like to comment on the show and react to the games. And then Pod Slam Jam as well, the Pod Slam Jam YouTube channel. Be sure to check out currently the two recent videos, Emmanuel Sharp and Marcus Sasser. They talk a little bit about the big win over Virginia. And Emmanuel Sharp specifically, he's been the first guard off the bench the past 2 games for the Cougars, so he talks a little bit about his progression throughout the season. That's PAWDSLAMAJAMA on YouTube, and that's pretty much it.
Pod Slam Jamma, it's your go-to spot for post-game coverage. You often have Dayon's on there, very good. Basketball, I see Chris on there a lot. It's a fun time. And like Andy said, it's kind of an interactive, if you want to get on YouTube comments and stuff post-game, so make sure to check him out there. Thank you all so much for checking on Locked On Cougs today. We've been breaking down the bowl game as we get ready for our last football game of the season. As weird as it is to say that we're still in football season a little bit. Make sure you check us back in a few days. We'll be breaking down the post-game, obviously, as well. I will. So make sure you check Locked On Cougs. If you hit subscribe, we'll be in your newsfeed each and every day. Thank you all so much for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. If you're going to look for a second listen, I'm going to recommend what Jackson's got going over at Locked On Rockets.
Yeah.
Kind of an up and down season for them, to say the least, but rebuilding
down
season
than up.
nonetheless. More down than up.
I will say give a shout out to Jackson because I don't know, many people, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but a lot of people probably don't know that Jackson was the brains behind Pod Slamma Jamma. He was kind of the engine that started going. He was certainly like I said, the architect behind it. They really started Pod Slamma Jamma. So in a sense, if it wasn't for Jackson, there would be no Pod Slamma Jamma. And who knows? It'd be a much different coverage.
He's kind of like the podfather of the Houston
That's
sports
exactly
scene.
what I had in my mind.
So we'll shout him out for your second listen. Go check them out. And then, as always, post-game stuff, go check out Andy doing it over at Pod Slamma Jamma. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Locked On Cougs Day. Locked On Cougs, the proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Go Cougs.